I just think it's unfortunate that our first port of call is the medical doctor. They are not trained in nutrition. They're trained in being drug dealers. They are a legal cartel and they address symptomology. So we are stuck. We're stuck seeking help from people that can't actually help us at root cause level. They don't put us in a situation where we can say, do you know what, I'm cured. I'm absolutely 100% better, or even close to. They don't take you there because they're trained in giving you drug to match a disease. It's on their list of, prescribed medications that we give when you say you have this problem, or we send you to the hospital, you come back with this diagnosis. I then have some medications next to that diagnosis. We prescribe you a certain dose. If it doesn't work, we up the dose, or we change the meds. And then if that doesn't work, we up the dose. So that's what I was dealing with. And I came home and fully believed what they were saying. If they were wearing a white coat, they were wise, they were older and smarter than I was. So I took the dietary advice, and then I took the drugs in 2014, and both failed to help me and get me out of trouble.
Okay, Lee, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. When did the carnivore journey start for you? How long have you been on a carnivore diet now?
So I've been on the carnivore diet now for just over 3.5 years. So this started in 2022 for me. And if you'd like me to get into the whole reason how I came across it and why I kind of took a leap of faith. So a lot of people associate my story with having a bag. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find this diet soon enough, really, and fast enough. I think in many ways, if I found this way of eating, this way of living, I probably would still have my colon. So I don't have a colon, I have a permanent ostomy bag. This actually led to depression. And so the reason why I went carnivore was to try and mitigate that. And interestingly, it was because I stumbled across an anecdote from Makeda Peterson. I actually first heard about it from Jordan Peterson, which is Makeda's father. He's basically like a right-wing speaker, a YouTuber. He does seminars. He's a teacher in psychiatry and all that kind of stuff. His daughter was struggling big time with her health. And I think actually through her suffering and her struggles, lots of people have found this way of eating, her father and her mother, etc. So if I go back to 2012, that's when I was first diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So it's an inflammatory bowel disease. It's also classed as an autoimmune disease. And so this was the first time in my life that I wasn't optimally healthy. The symptoms and the signals that my body was giving me, it was like, okay, something's going wrong for the first time kind of thing. And so essentially I took myself down to my GP. So it's a medical practice just a few miles away from where I live. And they went about asking me some questions, but obviously we need to get diagnosed. They didn't know exactly what was going on just based on my symptoms. They sent me to a hospital where they performed a sigmoid endoscopy, which is a procedure where they go up the back passage with a probing device, cameras. You're able to inflate certain parts of the digestive tract as you go up, and then they take biopsies and they run this to confirm, given the dysbiosis, etc., and the state of things in the biopsies, that's how they came back with confirmation of ulcerative colitis. So this disease exclusively affects the colon, where Crohn's can be quite similar. That affects all the way up the digestive tract, anywhere from gum to bum, essentially. So not great that I have a condition like this, but at the same time, I think it was probably better than Crohn's in the fact that it was kind of restricted in one part. And it turns out that part isn't hugely vital. It's not like it was my kidney, my liver or my heart and stuff like that. So basically, when I went back to my doctor again to talk about what this is, I saw a couple of GPs. They all mirrored the same sort of advice. And so they said, you need to increase fiber, make sure you're getting enough fiber. Whole grains are a good way, lots of vegetables, and eat little and often. So smaller, regular meals throughout the day. And now I look back at that and think that's crazy advice. To not rest the gut ever, and to just constantly eat and tax the organ where I'm inflamed. Anyway, I didn't know much at the time. I came away and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this because I was concerned about my health. I wasn't in need of medication. No one technically really ever is, but it wasn't too bad. It was quite mild, so they didn't actually put me on any steroids at that point. It wasn't until 2014, after my diagnosis and coming away from the doctor, being conscious about the food choices that the choices I'm making around my diet. 2 years later, this got worse. So immediately, their advice wasn't really working. And given it got worse, they now prescribed me some steroids to basically just lower inflammation a little bit, which does seem to happen in the initial stages of taking things like steroids. And I guess it was quite convenient where I would flare up. It would reduce the amount of times I was going to the toilet. So with ulcerative colitis or any IBD, even, I suppose IBS, it's similar. You kind of go in and out of phases where you feel like a normal person, you're sort of in remission, and then your body kind of just sort of says, right, I've had enough. And then you sort of flare up, and then you have the blood and the diarrhea. Not very nice symptoms, pretty horrible symptoms, which you lose weight, you lose your confidence, and that just affects everyday life basically. But these got worse, and so over the years, the amount of times I flared up during a year would go up, and the amount of time I was flaring up for was lasting longer. So in the beginning, it might have been kind of a few times a year, like 3 times for about 9, 10, 11 days, where the next year it might be 4 times for 2 weeks, and the next year 5 times, for a little bit, closer to 3 weeks, that sort of thing. So I've come away now, I'm eating what they're saying that I should be eating. I'm now taking their dietary advice, and I'm taking the medication. Now, like I say, it helped in the initial stages, but after about half a year, I felt like my body was right back to where I was without the medication. So my body had already adjusted and adapted, and it wasn't really doing me any favors anymore. And this kind of just got worse and worse. So in 2017, what happened is I flared up for the last time. I was going to the toilet anywhere, just before this last flare up, anywhere during a flare up, I would say 12 to 20 times, something like that, which was bad. It's bad enough. But in 2017, when I flared up, I was going actually almost 30 times a day immediately. And for the last 2 days before I was hospitalized, I was going 30 times a day. So yeah, relentless, exhausting, lost a lot of weight, muscle tissue included. And obviously when I presented at the hospital, because I genuinely couldn't do another day of it was so exhausting, felt like I was in real bad trouble, presented like a complete mess. They hooked me up with intravenous steroids and electrolytes to keep me sort of balanced out. But the whole idea with the steroids is to lower inflammation so that they can perform an investigatory, just to check up on things, what's going on, because we haven't seen them for a few years. They performed the same procedure to investigate the back passage and further up the colon. And they were really shocked because it wasn't just mild low end, it was severe all the way up. They just kept going and going, and there was no part of my colon that wasn't riddled with disease. So they trialed me on it's an immune suppressant drug. You probably are aware of those. They're quite potent and they can be quite dangerous in certain contexts. I wasn't supposed to be on this for very long, but they did keep me on it for a couple of days longer in hopes to get me out of trouble so they didn't have to put me under the knife. That obviously didn't work. Unfortunately, they kind of came in 2 days late, with being on this medication, saying it's obviously not taken, and the next morning we'll have to take you down and take your whole colon out. And the next thing I realised, I'm pretty much on my back, counting down, and the rest was history. I woke up a bit later, what felt like from a really long nap, and then felt very groggy. But it was about 4 to 6 hours, the surgery, and it went well. But and again, it's interesting. They deem this as the only real cure, to just take the organ out. And in that situation, there wasn't any other way around it. It was an emergency surgery to save my life. It was on its way to perforation, so that was necessary. But I think, in my heart of hearts, if I was to go back and say to my doctor, I've got this problem in 2012, and he gave me what I believe would be correct advice, eating species appropriately, to eat an elemental diet where you're not consuming things that potentially cause leaky gut, continue to inflame the gut, alcohol, seed oils, grains, tomatoes, cauliflower, things like this, nut seeds, and reduce the frequency in which I was consuming anything. Actually, I think I would have at least been in a position where I would have had the highest chance of getting out of a situation like I winded up in, basically. So what happened after that is you kind of have this strange contraption already fashioned to your stomach, because now I don't have a colon. I now have all my digestive tract all the way down to the terminal part of my ileum, and that protrudes through the abdominal wall. There's a bag that fashions over the top of it. It's called an ostomy, or an ostomy bag. That goes over the top, so that's how I go number 2 now, unfortunately. Once I was competent enough to take care of myself, change, clean, and they gave me a number to order medical supplies from a company. Once they were all kind of confident that I was okay and independent with what to do, they sent me home. And this was when I realised that I wasn't in a good position. In the hospital, I felt relatively okay, because I guess that they had seen this type of stuff repetitively in their careers. I felt like I was somewhat normal. But when I got home, that's when I realized that I wasn't. And everything was the same except for this one new thing on my body, this new body part, this ostomy bag. And I actually developed a love-hate relationship with food, because it meant that my digestive experience was even worse, if I'm being honest. There wasn't any pain as such, but there was a lot of discomfort, especially with the carbohydrates, the whole plant foods with fiber. Your bag's blowing up like a balloon. You're getting partial obstructions and blockages, which is a total nightmare. This made me question the state that food was in as it entered the organ that was compromised greatly. Again, I guess I was even in these early stages. This was sort of 2017 as I came out, seeing things for the first time going in my bag, thinking like, this is kind of strange. These foods don't break down very well at all. And, no wonder my colon became so inflamed if I was eating this way. And things just got worse and worse to the point where I had to reach out now for help about my depression, because it was just a love-hate relationship with food. My sleep was compromised. This led to just more stress, negativity in my thoughts, and feeling like I didn't belong. Like, where do I go? Where do I go from here, basically? So went back to my doctor and talked about my depression. He then passed me on to another unit called We Are With You, and we fixed a call together to just, I got to express myself, tell them about my position, and they asked everything that I could possibly even imagine that they would ask, based on someone dealing with some kind of cognitive impairment. Yeah, it was good at first because I felt like I was getting the ball rolling again, getting things off my chest, but I was waiting for a second call, and this second call never came. So days went by and I thought, okay, that's normal. Weeks went by and I thought, well, they've got to be really busy or something's gone wrong. And it wasn't until 2 months goes by, and I was well aware, I think at that point I was on my own. I never got the ball rolling again with the medical practice in Oxford. I was just sitting here on the couch and just watching YouTube, and by chance I stumbled across a video that I wouldn't usually put on, but for whatever reason I put this video on. It was called Don't Eat This, or at least that was written in the thumbnail, on the Low Carb Down Under channel from Michaela Peterson. This is the anecdote that I'm talking about, and this is the video that I watched that inspired me to take a giant leap of faith, just in hopes to mitigate my depression, because nothing else had worked for me. I didn't really like the idea of therapy and medication. Certainly these drugs I've heard about, they're hard to get off, and they only really lead to just more drugs or higher dosage, because they don't, they're not addressing root cause, like all medication, essentially. So, I saw this video, it blew me away. Basically, this young lady's talking about how she reversed autoimmunity and severe depression. And I thought that sounded a heck of a lot like me. So I thought, I've got nothing to lose. I'd be a fool to pass this up as an opportunity. And so the very next day I jumped in 100% on the BBBE challenge. So that's beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. Immediately overnight, my acid reflux went. The next day I realized that wasn't present, and so I thought that was kind of convenient. Not that it was pressing, and I wasn't really concerned about that, but that just went. A week goes by and I realized my skin's like vastly improving. It's kind of evening out. I've got a lot of scars on my face from plants and acne, but that's kind of evened out. It started to develop later in my life on my back, and that got quite bad, but in about a week it was 95% gone. I started to notice the energy came up after 2 weeks, because I was struggling for 2 weeks with energy. Never ever ate so much fat and never deprived myself from carbohydrates before, so it was all a learning curve and a new experience for me. After 2 weeks, the energy actually went up so much I was almost overwhelmed and didn't even know what to do with it. On day 21, so 3 weeks in, I'm going to work. I'm a window cleaner, so that's what I do. That's my bread and butter. That's how I make the majority of my money. And I remember getting up that day and feeling like I was satiated and still fueled up from the day before. I decided to go straight to work on an empty stomach, and I just felt as light as anything, like a feather, just navigating the world on a mission, just getting things done, and realized I was smiling and I was in a positive mood, and I enjoyed interactions with my customers and stuff. Not that I would not necessarily enjoy them or their company, but it's difficult to focus on anything else other than yourself when you're really depressed. And I realized I kind of opened up that day. My world opened up. My eyes opened, it felt like, for the first time. My cognition turned on and my depression lifted. Basically, I pulled over in my van on the side of the road and just recorded my testimony. I couldn't even help myself. I almost felt impatient. Maybe I'm jumping ahead of things. Maybe it's not completely gone, but I've been on this diet now for 3.5 years after setting myself literally just a 30-day challenge, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. I've not gone back. That's how good this way of life is.
That is fantastic. I started the carnivore diet as well 5 years ago because I was suffering from urticaria and psoriasis. So I have suffered a lot, but I cannot imagine living a situation that you lived. In fact, I told you I respect you a lot. That's why I wanted to have you on my channel. And also because, maybe later we'll talk about this fiber meat. We come on this diet for health problems, but later on we discovered that it is way more than that. So we start to enjoy life, to enjoy interactions with people, like you said, and you see many other things improve. I had skin issues, so it was one of the very first things that I immediately started to realize it was getting better. My skin was getting better, but you figured out, you saw the same thing. So you had problems with your colon and digestion, but you saw skin improving as well. So everything connects all together, because I think this is the proper way of eating for human beings. So that's the reason why everything connects and energy comes up. You feel satiated for the first time in your life. You don't have to eat many times during the day. You experience mental also benefits. So I think we have had an incredible gift by discovering this way of eating, and I definitely admire you for the strength that I'm sure you have, for the life experience that you've made. But I was very, very curious to know, first of all, what was the dietary advice that doctors used to give you in the past? You said something, but maybe you can say something more on that.
So the idea really was to base diet my meals around grains. So base meals around grains, make those grains whole grains. So if you're eating white bread, switch that out for whole grain, brown bread, seeded bread, all that stuff. White rice for brown rice, because their understanding is that the fiber is beneficial for the gut. They think that to add something that's indigestible, because we can ferment it, that actually feeds the gut, and that there's a benefit to consuming something like that. But of course, all carbohydrates are non-essential, including the indigestible polysaccharides we call fiber that are indigestible for humans. They're totally non-essential. And so are also the benefits of fiber aren't exclusive to fiber. But I didn't know any of this. And so, of course, I took their advice. The other pieces of advice that they gave me was to eat little and often, and so regular meals throughout the day. So really, they're talking about 3 main meals with likely 2 small snacks in between. So what I was doing is kind of like porridge oats in the morning, or oatmeal. I would kind of add things like goji berries, apples, bananas, cinnamon, and believe that those were beneficial. I would snack on things like almonds and cashews before my second meal, my main meal, and that would be kind of like a seeded bread sandwich. I would have some animal protein, but of course there's not a lot of fat in things like chicken breast and cod. So I never really consumed a lot of animal fat throughout my whole life. I did drink breast milk. I have enjoyed some cheese, and I've always liked chicken. And I had things like fish and chips. As someone over in the UK, it's kind of a cliche, but yeah, you're talking about lean protein. Well, protein is lean, but protein without the fat, and then they create this batter that they deep fry in seed oils. And I never even questioned what they fried it in. I just thought it's food. I just thought, like, I'm going to a place where they sell food. I'm a guy who's hungry, so I'm going to eat food, and I'm eating balanced. And I'm eating a mixture of different colors. So that's another thing. I thought if I was eating some green and some red and some orange and some yellow, I'm ticking the boxes in terms of all the nourishment that I need. Because fruit and veg contains all the vitamins and minerals. That's the impression that I was under. The advice in the mainstream, the media, magazines, bodybuilding, YouTube videos, whatever it is, wherever you look, it's just misinformation. And I was brainwashed. They did a very good job of brainwashing me. I'm not a big conspiratorial guy. I don't believe everyone's in on it. Like most doctors have good intentions. They care about the people that they see. I just think it's unfortunate that our first port of call is the medical doctor, and we are now living in a medical monopoly since about 1912. So that's the reason for that. They are not trained in nutrition. They're trained in being drug dealers. They are a legal cartel, and they address symptomology. So we are stuck. We're stuck seeking help from people that can't actually help us at root cause level. They don't put us in a situation where we can say, do you know what, I'm cured. I'm absolutely 100% better, or even close to. They don't take you there because they're trained in giving you drugs to match a disease. It's on their list of, prescribed medications that we give when you say you have this problem, or we send you to the hospital, you come back with this diagnosis. I then have some medications next to that diagnosis. We prescribe you a certain dose. If it doesn't work, we up the dose, or we change the meds, and then if that doesn't work, we up the dose. So that's what I was dealing with, and I came home and fully believed what they were saying. If they were wearing a white coat, they were wise, they were older and smarter than I was. So I took the dietary advice, and then I took the drugs in 2014, and both failed to help me and get me out of trouble.
I think the reason why many people don't believe the benefits of a carnivore diet is, I would say, most doctors, most nutritionists have not seen people benefiting from anything. I mean, they give advice, but they don't really see people having benefits from it. So they don't see people cure diseases. So when they see it, they are skeptical because it is something that doesn't happen every day. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the main reason you suffered from ulcerative colitis in the first place? Many things can concur, but what do you think is the main reason?
I would put it like this. It's an autoimmune disease. Every single autoimmune disease, whether it's Addison's, Hashimoto's, IBD, psoriasis, eczema, Crohn's, these are all sitting on a foundation of what we call leaky gut, intestinal permeability. You cannot have autoimmune disease without a leaky gut. So what happens first is I consumed things. I was in an environment where things came into my system, basically my inputs. That's what I like to call them, just my inputs in general, my diet, my lifestyle. Something came into my body, multiple things potentially. There's not one way you can open these what we call tight junctions. But these tight junctions, that you've got cells that line gluten all the way through your digestive tract. You've got a mucosal layer. And basically, if you think about the digestive tract as a tube, A at the top, all the way down to Z, if something goes in the top of the tube and comes out the bottom, technically it never really entered the body, right? Now, when we eat to nourish ourselves, so we consume food, we absorb and assimilate nutrients. Our stomach breaks down food, we absorb nutrition in the small intestine, we reabsorb water in the colon, sodium, etc., and then we have waste product, and then that's what comes out. Certain things want to go into the bloodstream, like nutrients, and then there's other things we don't want in the bloodstream. And what happens when we have leaky gut? Those things enter the bloodstream, and we don't want them there. That's what triggers autoimmunity. Now, what can cause this to happen? Lectins. Absolutely, we know that 100%. I know that we shouldn't be making too many cause and effect claims, but I'm happy to make a cause and effect claim about gluten. That's not technically a lectin, by the way, but it's a plant protein that we can't break down properly. Relative to other animal proteins, very, very difficult. And at least 70% of the population has a very difficult time dealing with gluten. It's particularly the gliadin aspect of this protein. And there's another lectin in whole grains. So you've got the gluten. The gliadin is the most egregious. But you've also got wheat germ gluten. And even in gluten-free products, that's still present. So for people with celiac and things like that, they still will probably have a problem with this protein. It's a carbohydrate, plant-binding protein that we, relatively to animal nutrition, animal proteins, we have a real tough time liberating the amino acids from this protein. Proteins are large structures usually. We want to break these down to at least a tripeptide. That's 3 amino acids chemically bound together. We can assimilate that. Anything larger than that, not assimilated. So therefore, we have this large structure of protein that can't just enter the bloodstream as it normally would, tumbling through the small intestine, zapping it as it's got charge, damaging all the little microvilli, these little structures that pull nutrients in. So the whole reason we eat food is to assimilate nutrition. Eating whole grains damages our ability to absorb nutrition. So absolutely counterintuitive to consume whole grains, the gluten and the wheat germ gluten, and we don't break these down. Now it's tumbling through the digestive tract. And what happens, you've got a molecule called zonulin. Zonulin basically is think of it like you're trying to get into a club and you got to show your ID. Okay, yeah, that's who it says you are, you're of age, I will let you in. I will grant you passage. You're a pass, or you could say, like, you know, you're about to enter you're trying to get onto a plane to travel. You're a passenger. That's probably the better way to put it. You show the person your ID, your passport and everything, your ticket, you've paid, it's definitely you. I will grant you access. Zonulin is that grants you access. It opens these tight junctions just a little bit and temporarily, so it can allow nutrition to be absorbed in the lumen of our intestine. But, and this isn't they're all nutrition, but basically then it shuts, and that's indicated. That's normal function, if you like. But when we consume these larger proteins that we haven't been able to liberate, what happens is these come along, and it's like now these junctions have to be open longer, they're open wider, and they stay open for longer. And now you have an undigested protein in the blood, and you have potentially harmful pathogens, bacteria, microbes also entering the blood, and we don't want them there. This is tight for a reason. Gut health is not about addition, adding more things in. It's about subtraction, taking things out. You know, we don't want the grains, we don't want the seed oils, we don't want the alcohol, we don't want the binders and the chemicals and all these things in the foods, all this stuff. We don't want that. We want real human food, and that's basically fatty animal nutrition, mostly from ruminant animals, wild oily fish, whole eggs, things like this. When we eat that way, this stays tight and the structural integrity of the gut remains. If we consume things like seed oils, alcohol, certain medications as well, even things that we can breathe in our environment, if it doesn't belong in the body, these things are inflammatory. And when you elicit a larger response, if you like, an elevated response of this call for the molecule zonulin to open these junctions wider and keep them open for longer, things slip through, and we don't want that to happen. And so basically this is what offset autoimmunity. In me, I had a proclivity of weakness in my gut. That's what gave me Crohn's. Other people have it further up. They may have I had colitis. Other people may have it further up. They will have Crohn's. Depending on where these things attach and how the body's dealing with it, we have different autoimmune conditions. And you know, think about the skin. It's the largest organ on our body, and many times we come out with signs on our face, rosacea, acne, rashes, itches. Think that, you know, it's screaming to you as a sign, stop consuming something. And for a lot of people that are consuming a balanced diet, it's very difficult to figure out what that something is that you shouldn't consume, because we're eating everything. We're told to eat everything in moderation, and that's totally counterintuitive if you really want to sort of seek optimal human health. And so that it started with autoimmunity, most likely from gluten, could be seed oils or a combination, even alcohol, because I did consume some alcohol, and it could have also been certain things in my environment, but I believe probably a lot was at play here. And therefore, after that happened, and I've got all these symptoms, to continue consuming those foods, little and often, and to increase fiber and be diligent about consuming plenty of fiber that's indigestible, this only exacerbates a problem like this.
This thing that fiber is indigestible was completely new to me, because people have always said that fiber is essential, or that people have always expected me to eat fiber. One of the very first things that I heard when I started was, other than cholesterol, of course, it was always about fiber. You cannot deprive yourself of fiber. Fiber is essential. Fiber is important. But I'm sure there is a study. It is a clinical study where they instructed people to consume different amounts of fiber, and these were all people that had gut problems, constipation. So they saw that the only people that improved completely, that resolved completely all their problems, were the people that eliminated fiber completely. The ones that decreased the amount of fiber were the people that got some improvements. The only people that kept having problems were the people that were still consuming the same amounts of fiber. So it was clear to me in the beginning that we don't need fiber, but people continue. They keep pushing this narrative, and I think it is outrageous. It is a disgrace that even doctors advise to eat grains at every meal. This is absurd. We need to change the narrative. People need to know that carbohydrates in general are not needed at all. All we need is meat and animal products and fat, animal fats. I was curious to ask you about this. I heard in your channel, in your videos, that when you got your bag, one of the things that changed is that you could clearly see how you were processing foods. So you could see that if you eat, for example, broccoli or nuts, you could see them completely the same, unchanged, basically. But you have never seen meat stay the same. You always digested it. I wanted to ask you, what did you see in differences between various foods, different vegetables and animal products? How did they change? What did you absorb the most? And what were the foods that were completely indigestible to you?
So basically, when you consume a plant food that's whole with the fiber, so I call them plant bones, but we're essentially talking about the carbohydrate portion of the plant we can't digest, that props plants upright. These are very robust structures. And so however we finish chewing, once we've swallowed that plant food, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, rice, whatever, nut seeds, the food doesn't change all the way down until it reaches your colon. It does not change at all. Bearing in mind, we absorb nutrition in our small intestine. So our stomach didn't do anything to it. It's like battery acid, but it can't do anything to the fiber. So if I cut a shape into a piece of broccoli or a pineapple or mango or mushroom and just swallowed it, that exact same size and shape of whatever plant food I swallow will be in the bag within about 3 or 4 hours. I can guarantee it every time. But I've also swallowed chunks of meat, even bigger, and I've never seen a piece of meat in my bag, because if you cut your finger off and swallowed your finger right now, it would strip the finger down to the bone, your stomach, because it's like battery acid. That's the job of the stomach, is to liberate amino acids, fatty acids, so you could absorb nutrition. We cannot do that with fiber. Fiber, if you think about it, it endures all weathers, all these plants, all these acids and sugars and that. It just sits there pretty. It's fine. Cellulose is indigestible for all forms of life apart from ruminant animals. Those ruminant animals can only digest fiber because they contain the microbes in their cecum, and they have a 4-chambered stomach. If you look at hindgut digesters, the apes, they have massive cecums, massive colons. Carnivores, they're like us. We're carnivores. We have very large small intestines and small large intestines, right? And that's for a reason. And we have carnivore stomach, in terms of the fluid, the acidity of the fluid in the stomach fluid. So we can absolutely accommodate animal nutrition of any sort, break it down 100% and absorb about 98% of the nutrients. Once it's in the bag, it's like non-recognizable. It's in a liquid form. That would reach the colon. The colon reabsorbs that water and sodium, and then you've got a little small amount of waste. With fiber, you've got insoluble and soluble. The insoluble is the cellulose, lignin, and hemicellulose. This basically is totally indigestible for human beings. And so however you finish chewing and swallow that food with that fiber, it doesn't change. You'll see the skins, the seeds, the colors, the shapes, absolutely everything. So the only difference is by having a colon, because I never noticed this before, is that because you reabsorb the water in the colon, it kind of like sucks it up like that, and then it's traveling like this, and it's getting pushed and condensed, and it gets darker and drier. But then when you go to the number 2, you're not going to see what I see. But even people that do go number 2 with their colon see bits of, corn and peas and carrot. I think we all have. And so that made it all the way through, and you can still you can still recognize it. You will never ever see an egg or a piece of red meat. You won't find it. You can look, you just won't find it. So the body is supposed to break the stuff down and absorb the stuff from animal nutrition. We are not designed or created or possess the machinery to accommodate so much plant material.
Have you seen any difference with dairy? Have you ever tried eating dairy on a regular basis? I know many people suffer from constipation when they eat it a lot. Have you ever tried? Have you eliminated? What have you seen?
Yeah, I can tell you why this works. This happens as well. So basically, things like cheese will stodge you up a little bit, and it will change the color. It will dilute the color a little bit. So it will be, rather than like a brownier color, it will be more of a sort of a yellowy, greeny hint to that. Do you know what I mean? It tones it down. But I'm not going to experience the problems other people experience because I don't have the colon. So I'm not going to be fermenting as much and things like that. But it's basically more stodgier if I eat cheese. If I drink milk, it can go slightly more the other way, just slightly. It might be a bit faster and more liquidy. But I have mixed opinions about dairy. It's fine. Look, there's so many different ways of taking this, but it's like, we're not baby cows, we're not calves, we're adult humans. But if you look at almost every natural tribe functioning out in the world right now, almost all of them consume dairy. The Kazakhs consume only dairy during summertime. So let's just bear that in mind, right? The Maasai, they consume raw milk with blood. I've consumed raw milk, but I didn't realize raw milk over here is absolutely nothing like the raw milk they have in natural tribes. Just nothing like it. The way where their cattle are in relation to other animals, things like chickens, the chickens are way higher up. There's not cross-contamination. The way they sterilize things, totally different. What we fed the cows and the environment, etc. It goes on and on and on. But in terms of dairy, now, I don't notice a difference. Like, I don't feel constipated or anything like that. It's difficult without a colon to have that kind of symptom, but it might stodge it up a little bit. Now, what I would say about dairy and why it might cause constipation. If you think about when someone has constipation, what do we suggest in terms of supplementation? Magnesium. Certainly magnesium, right. So magnesium and calcium are like this. It's like insulin, glucagon. They are antagonists. They balance each other out. So basically, if you are too high in calcium, it might stodge you up. That's why some people then take a magnesium supplement. But it's not necessarily that they were deficient in magnesium. It's that they were consuming too much dairy for their personal physiology, too much calcium. So that's the reason for it, I think, in terms of constipation. The reason for the gas is because it is fermentable to some degree. So some people with sort of intestinal failure, they can't afford to consume dairy because they may die. So what they have to do is basically consume like broths, red meat and organs and things like that, marrow, but in broth form because it's non-fermentable. That's my take on that. Basically, dairy will break down 100%, but question the form of dairy. It needs to be high fat. I prefer raw. If you have autoimmune disease, I don't think you should be consuming any dairy whatsoever. And the reason why is the casein. It's not lactose intolerant, it's casein intolerance. Most people lack the machinery to deal with casein protein. And if you think about cheese, is usually about 85-90% casein protein. So if you have autoimmunity, no matter what it is, get rid of all forms of dairy, even ghee. Just get rid of it because you will give yourself all of the chance in the world to get yourself where you want to be. Get rid of the plants, get rid of the dairy. No tea. I wouldn't drink tea. I wouldn't drink coffee. These can all upset digestive related kind of symptoms and things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it is very, very interesting. I discovered the same thing because I've been experimenting a little with dairy. I've seen it gives me constipation, but in the beginning, I was attributing this to casein because if you research a little, casein acts like a glue. In fact, in the past, glue was made out of casein. So I looked up to see if there was some dairy without casein, and there is only ricotta, cottage cheese. So every once in a while, I consume some ricotta, and it doesn't give me any problem. I think if a person is healthy, he can tolerate it. If you consume it once a week, once every 2 weeks is fine for a healthy person. If you have autoimmune issues, absolutely not. Just focus on meat and fish and fat. Then you have to see what is best for you. Then I saw that even consuming ricotta in large amounts gave me the same symptoms. So I thought maybe it is lactose. I was researching lactose also can give constipation. But then I also discovered this thing about calcium, because if you think about it, just like you said, calcium contracts the muscles, while magnesium relaxes. Excess calcium is detrimental to our health because it also depletes not only magnesium but also zinc. And I think it is one of the many reasons I developed psoriasis in the past, because when I was little, my mother used to give me a lot of yogurts and dairy products. So I think I was over consuming calcium, and I was consuming very little red meat. So I think I was zinc deficient. So I think absolutely you can consume every once in a while dairy, but I'm with you on this. Most of the times it should not be consumed.
Yeah.
I want to also go deeper on the improvements that you experience following a carnivore diet. First of all, you said you've been following, you started with beef, butter, bacon and eggs. That's what Dr. Canberry advises, right? And then did you follow different versions of a carnivore diet, or you stayed the same? And what other improvements did you notice?
Yeah, so after the BBBE, I was kind of excited to get some dairy, like other dairy other than the butter, like a bit more cheese and things like that. So I did try that out, and that was fine. I did okay for a while on cheese. I didn't feel too different. I don't know whether it helped with cravings though. I mean, it can just make you want a bit more cheese, but sometimes it can play with you and tell you that you want carbs, you know, because of the sugar and the moreish element that it has with the casomorphines, etc. After that, I guess I was kind of playing around with introducing seafood things. Realised I really like a lot of seafood, like mackerel, salmon. I'll even have some scallops here and there, some prawns, just here and there. But I quite like surf and turf. I guess I started to introduce like a bit of venison and a bit of lamb, just trying different things, you know, some organ meats. I didn't try a lot of organ meats when I initially started. So it was just kind of trial and error. I've realized that dairy is pretty much a no-go. I can, like you say, I can do it here and there and it's fine, but I instantly get nasal, like blocked up, you know, congested if I have dairy of any sort. If I introduce too much dairy like milk or any kind of yogurt, I crave too much and I want carbs, and that's no good. So basically what I'm doing these days is a modified line diet. I do mostly beef with a bit of lamb, and I include some oily fatty fish in that diet as well, because I believe, you know, that the extra DHA, being that it's 20% of the lipids in the brain is made of DHA. I think that that's how our brains grew, not just eating ruminant meat, but also a lot of fish. We lived close to coastal areas and things like that. And things like magnesium, zinc, taurine, you know, these things that often people can find that they can be low in iodine, selenium, these are higher in fish. So I like fish for that reason. Even though they're monogastric, I eat maybe 1 day or 2 days a week fish with my red meat. I don't go crazy on organs. I did tamper with organs and experimented with liver, kidney, heart. I quite like heart. I quite like brain. I quite like things like spleen and things like that. But I'm not really, I don't mind kidney, but I'm not massively into liver. Now, I did enjoy it a bit more earlier, and I enjoyed it more raw. When I cook liver, I'm not really a fan. If it's more raw, I quite like a few pieces, but it doesn't take much for my body to tell me I've had enough. So I just listen to my body. And so that's technically what I've done. I continue to experiment and listen to my body. When my body tells me yeah, or it wants more, I think that's a good sign. If it doesn't, I think then we shouldn't force feed ourselves. We should enjoy the things that we're eating. We should enjoy the ground beef, the lamb, the steak, some organs, some fish, whole eggs, etc. I did even quit eggs, not entirely. Like I stopped consuming eggs. I've had a few here and there, but I don't feel as good on eggs as I do ruminant meat. And interestingly, I feel better on raw eggs, even with the whites being raw. I know that there's some minor concerns about sort of anti-nutrients and things like that in eggs, but really they're not too much of a problem. I've not noticed any negative side effects from consuming raw eggs. In fact, that used to be my favorite breakfast. I used to feel so energized and light eating about 8 raw eggs, just neck them basically. But I now consume ruminant meat with some oily fish to satiety. 1 or 2 meals a day serves me really well. I don't ever really do 3 meals, and I basically don't ever snack. I only drink water from a glass bottle, which I just mineralize by putting 1 fairly generous pinch of Celtic salt in. I structure it outside by just leaving it outside, let it get some local light information, and that's it. I don't drink much water at all. In fact, I may drink about 700 milliliters a day.
Have you ever tried eating only egg yolks instead of the whole egg?
Yes, I did for a period of time, but again, like the dairy, it's very high in calcium, and I find that if I eat too many, I get a little twitch in my eyelid. And the moment I take that out, because if you think about magnesium and calcium, they're pretty much 1-to-1 in blood, in nature, in fish, in ruminant animals, roughly overall 1-to-1. If you look at eggs, it's about, I think, something like 6 milligrams of magnesium to about 28 milligrams of calcium. So immediately that's going to kick that out of balance. And I can do it okay here and there for maybe up to 3 days. Beyond that little twitch comes along. And so I know that that's an indication that I'm just not supposed to eat that many eggs for whatever reason.
You also eat brain. Wow, that's fascinating.
Twice. I've only had it twice.
Actually, you had it twice. Okay.
Yeah, it's twice. Yeah, I had one lamb's brain and one pig's brain, and I had a bit of it raw and a bit of it cooked, just to see what the difference was. I would say it's a lot like fishy eggs. It doesn't sound that appealing if I say fishy eggs, but the raw pig's brain, when I had that raw, it was like a rich cream cheese. It was really, really nice. Yeah.
I never tried raw brain, but cooked, yes.
I'm supposed to not eat it raw apparently, but I seem to do okay. So
brain is also very rich in DHA and omega-3s.
Yes,
if you have it. That's almost like a fish. You were saying you don't notice problems with fish, even though it is a monogastric animal. Yeah, the only way I experience problems when I eat fish is when it is a farmed fish. When it is, when it is a wild caught, doesn't give me any problem. It doesn't matter that they are monogastric. I mean, maybe it's that they feed themselves on a natural diet. They eat in the sea.
Yeah. I'd say that's exactly right. I mean, the wild salmon compared to the farm salmon is just so different. It's untrue. They have to give it the color. That they're swarming in these little cages, just millions of them swimming around with all the feces in tight spaces, and you've got all this lice that come along, and they feed them pellets with antibiotics. And the fact that they are monogastric, I mean, you eat enough of that, it's going to probably cause a problem. So for that reason, I only source animals that eat what they would naturally gravitate towards. If my ruminant animals don't eat grass for life, I don't eat it, pretty much. Unless all that was there for me is conventional grain finished, I would still opt for that. But I just prioritize, pastured for life or wild salmon and mackerel, etc.
Yeah, it's not only about salmon, unfortunately. I've noticed it is every fish that I can eat. When I eat it wild caught, it doesn't give me any problem. When I eat it from a market and then I knew that it was farmed fish, it also happened with sea bream and other species. When I know they are wild caught, I can tolerate them wonderfully, but farmed is a problem. Another problem it is when you consume large fishes, when they have more microplastics and heavy metals. But if you consume mackerel and anchovies, they are great.
Sardines, herring, but not so bad. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you do not consume liver. You ever consumed it in the beginning?
Now and then. Do you know, basically I'll be in a butcher shop and sometimes I see liver, and when I'm looking at it, my body's like, just grab a bit of that. Then I grab a bit of it. I'm thinking maybe I need to replete myself with certain nutrients. I don't know what it is, maybe B1, B2, who knows? If I crave eggs, I won't say, no, I'm not going to ever have eggs. I said I quit, I'll have 1 or 2 egg yolks here and there, like very, very rarely. And if I crave them, maybe it's the choline or maybe it's a bit more B12, who knows? Iodine, selenium, these things, I don't know, but I just listen to my body and it seems to be pretty reliable.
Speaking about fish, I will give you a suggestion. Try cod liver. Have you ever tried it?
Cod liver, yes. Yeah.
It
Lots
is
of different
delicious.
Well. Yeah.
Also very, very rich in omega-3s, iodine.
Yes. Yeah. And, goes great with lamb and eggs, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting hungry now.
Yeah. Lamb and fish are a match made in heaven. I was like, really? That doesn't sound like it would go. And then I ate lamb with fish, and every time I do it, I'm like, wow, that's so good. Yeah.
You didn't answer me when I asked you about the improvements you had on the carnivore diet. Maybe if you can talk more about that, and then we're finished. What did you notice when you started the carnivore diet? For example, I noticed immediately after 1 week, I started to sleep like a baby, like I never slept in my entire life. I wanted to know if you noticed the same thing or other things not connected to what you were trying to improve.
Yeah, so I mean, that first video that I recorded when I pulled over in my van, I was even talking about not sweating as much and not burning in the sun. So I noticed that even in 21 days. I don't burn. I can't burn. I've tried burning and it just doesn't happen. So that's one benefit. I think that's seed oils mostly, but that is omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. You've got these cells under the skin, eicosanoids and stuff. And I think, with what we give the body, we rebuild ourselves. If you're giving it the wrong materials, we rebuild these tissues under the skin, I think, in the wrong composition, and it just doesn't favor us. We then become more sensitive. Plants increase photosensitivity in many ways, and so that was another benefit. You touched on sleep there. I wouldn't say I slept like a baby. Like, I didn't sleep longer or deeper I don't know, but when I wake up, I feel sharper. When I wake up, I'm ready to go more. My cognition's already there. I'm not like, how am I going to get out of bed? I'm hitting the snooze button constantly, kind of thing. Like when you're on carbohydrates, I just think you need more sleep. I think you need more sleep to process what you're eating and to heal, to try and recover from the day before what you ate, you know. And so I think when you eat clean and you eat appropriately, I didn't necessarily notice that I slept more. I just probably slept better. You know, the quality improved. I seem to have less plaque in my teeth, which makes sense. Less wax in my ears. And I just didn't, I like the whole cognition. That's my favorite thing. Obviously depression lifted, but I feel sharper. I can think clearer and I can articulate myself clearer. That wasn't the case before carnivore. Just not even at all, not even close. It's a game changer, sort of night and day difference.
Wonderful. What would you advise to somebody that is going through the same problems that you had in the past? I mean, before having to being hospitalized, like what unfortunately happened to you, what would you advise to maybe look into the diet, or are there other lifestyle improvements that you would suggest?
Yeah, so if you were in my situation, or if I went back and spoke to my previous self, I would just try and warn myself of what food really is, that we should be able to digest and absorb the things that we eat. If you're going to say it's food, it shouldn't be indigestible. I'm not just talking about fiber, I'm talking about the plant proteins, the lectins that we can't break down, which can cause intestinal permeability and offset this cascade of events in the first place. So things like fiber, lectins, you know, these come from plants. Plants are an issue. You think cocaine, heroin, alcohol, marijuana, these are plants. Plants are an issue. You think of all the toxins that we find, the pesticides, these are plants. So over and over again, all roads seem to lead to Rome. Come away from plants. If you have to, if you're someone, and I'm not saying I don't believe them. I'm sure they do believe this is the case themselves. You know, you hear it. I can't live without carbs. I have to have my oats. I have to have this and that. Make sure it's not whole grain. We've heard that they are more beneficial. They're not. Now, if you have gut issues, I would like to see you on white rice if you have to consume carbohydrates. Pressure cooked white rice, you know, gluten-free, lectin-free, fiber-free. Yes, it's going to spike your blood glucose, which isn't good, but at least you're going to help sort of save your gut the unnecessary stress. I would say as well, we are far too used to and accustomed to over-consuming in general. We're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water, constantly sipping on water, constantly diluting our stomach acid, which isn't beneficial whatsoever, constantly snacking, constantly eating, constantly feeding. We are not grazing ruminant animals. You know, we are hypercarnivores, and that's not even up for debate. You can look into stable isotope ratio analysis, and this is clearly indicated. We're supposed to fast and feast on fatty animal nutrition. We should be basing that around ruminant animals. The more sensitive you are, the more exclusively ruminant fatty meat you should be consuming, because it's the least inflammatory, because they process what they eat through 4 stomachs. By the time they've turned it into amino acids and fatty acids and micronutrients, that's what you're getting. And you're not getting the lectins, you're not getting the natural pesticides and the anti-nutrients. There's nothing indigestible, if you like, in a cow, what you would actually eat. You know, no one's going to be eating the hooves, and most people aren't interested in the genitals. You know, I'm not really interested in that. So just eat what you enjoy out of a cow, out of a lamb, bison, buffalo, you name it. It's all wonderful stuff, and focus on that, because that's been the human diet. I think history is important, to know at least a little bit of history, real accurate history about, you know, anthropological data, different tribes, Weston A. Price, his work, just basic little things like this can really help you to understand and put your mind at rest if you're concerned about going carnivore, because lots of people think that we need the colors, we need balance, but we find that perfectly in ruminant animals. When we eat a diverse range of cuts from a ruminant animal, we get perfect balance. Nature doesn't make mistakes. We don't see the plants and the grains and all this stuff on the cave walls. We see large ruminant animals, and that's been the human diet since the beginning of our time. Yeah, focus on that, prioritize that, and come away from what's inflaming your gut. It is glycating cells and tissues, which would be the sugar, you know, all that kind of stuff. So very difficult to try and convince someone in a paragraph or even in a day. But yeah, I would say to at least consider it, and hopefully, you know, can plant a seed and someone else can come along and water it, and something might happen from that.
It is so important what we're doing on YouTube, because people can find us. You know, the carnivore diet is going also mainstream. So maybe even people that today don't have any problems, they hear about it. And then maybe in the future, when they will have problems, maybe they will consider trying it.
Exactly.
So it is very, very important that we keep pushing these arguments, and we make sure that people at least know about carnivore. So
yeah, exactly. That's the most important thing. I don't care what someone eats. If I cared what someone eats, how would I even get through a day? Everyone's not eating carnivore. You know, it would be stressing me out all the time. Like, oh my God, you can't eat that. You can't eat that. You know, it's hard to see when children are eating things because they don't know better. But I think if given the right information, then at least it's an informed choice. It shouldn't be guessing, or it shouldn't be brainwashing and directing me through, you know, life to eat a certain way, which is actually going against me. It seems unfair. And so it's only fair really to get the information out there, and then at least people can choose. Doesn't matter what you choose. That's your thing, your life. But now you have potentially some new information. If you stumbled across this video, consider it. It's there. If you do wind up in trouble, you have that as an option at least to fall back on and try, because the proof's in the pudding.
I also wanted to tell you this. Did you see that Mikhaila Peterson now is not carnivore anymore? She has changed her diet after 8 years.
I saw most of that video, but what I was so busy yesterday. What is she introduced then that's not carnivore?
She has introduced some vegetables. I don't remember. There are some things that she really likes, like rucola and other things, but it is mostly still a ketogenic diet.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
She said
for sure. People say like, oh, she's not carnivore anymore. Like, well, hyper carnivores eat 70% meat and above. Yeah. So if she's eating like 90, 95, she's way above hyper carnivore.
Also, many people say when you do a carnivore diet, then you cannot switch back, you cannot add carbs back, because then you get used to some foods and you cannot tolerate anything else. But the problem is that the overconsumption of foods that are not really foods, they're of carbohydrates, for example, they are the cause. They are the ones that made it impossible for you to tolerate other things, and they made it strictly necessary for you to be strict with your diet. Mikhaila Peterson, after 8 years, she was very, very unhealthy in the past. She had severe problems, but even she could reintroduce other foods. And she also said that had some treatments for parasites, so she felt better after this. I mean, I'm happy that she can have the freedom to reintroduce other things. She has been waiting to do this for a very long time. The only reason she wasn't doing it was because she couldn't. Now that she can, I'm happy that she is choosing like we are choosing. This is the most important thing.
Most people aren't as sensitive as Mikhaila, and so if they want to go back, they can. Now, it might be 3 days, which is going to take. So look, when you come out of ketosis, it might take you about 3 days to get back in. That's not, that thing I ate was just so terrible. It might not be, but you've kicked yourself out of ketosis. Now you're on you could say an alternative fuel source, if you like. You're not going to feel great. If you feed your dog, mostly carnivore, and you give him loads of brown rice and now kick him out of ketosis and fatty acid, oxidation, do you think that dog's going to thrive that week? Probably going to have a different energy pattern, a different sleep pattern, a different bowel movement pattern. Everything's going to change. But remember, where we came from a place of inertia. If I consume white rice with every one of my meals now, I'm going to kick myself out of ketosis. I might not feel too good, but after a while, you get back into that momentum and you then start to develop that inertia. Your body then wants to utilize glucose because that's the gear you're in. It only takes 3 days of then correcting that and you come back and you're in ketosis. And it might make you feel a little bit worse for it for a bit, but give it long enough time again and you're back in your rhythm and you feel good. I just understand that we get more energy, more ATP at fatty acid oxidation. We feel better. The brain and the heart thrives on ketones. I understand we can kind of reverse kidney damage and things like that when we eat and provide ourselves with enough stuff. And so, yes, you can introduce other things. And if you get away with it because you're not getting symptoms, you can do. It's up to you. It doesn't bother me what you eat. I think if you introduce something and immediately you go, oh, I never used to get that immediate sign, that gurgling or this repeat sensation or a rash or moods, you develop a more of a moody sort of way. It's not like that food wasn't causing you those problems before. It's just that you did it relentlessly and the body stopped telling you that was a problem. If I smoke a cigarette, I cough. If I keep smoking cigarettes, I enjoy them. Do I now go and buy cigarettes every week? No. It's about inertia. You get used to, so many different things. People that drink teas with lots of sugar in, they can't drink a tea without sugar. You cut away the sugar and you taper it out. Now they're sugar-free. You give them a tea with 7 sugars that they used to have in their tea and they spit it out. It's inertia. It's what you get used to.
Yeah, it's also the same thing with alcohol. The people that tolerate alcohol the best are those that drink all the time.
And those that drink all the time for 10 years can't stop overnight because they'll die. Inertia. That's inertia in a nutshell. So, yeah.
Okay, Lee, thank you so much for the time and for the interview. Very pleasurable. I wish you all the best for your channel and for your future. Thank you so much. There is anything else you want to say?
If anybody's inspired to go carnivore for this video, I personally would recommend that you don't switch overnight like I did. I would personally take it very slowly and take comfort in that. Enjoy the process. Enjoy those remaining carbohydrates or whatever it is. Address the problematic foods first. Take out the processed foods. If you have gut problems, take out the whole grains and the fiber. If you have blood glucose problems, you want to potentially focus on the more fibrous things, vegetables and things, keep them in last. It depends on what your condition is. If you have a liver problem, get rid of the alcohol immediately. Get rid of the fruit juices next. It's about individualistic, thinking. Like, we're all different. We're in different contexts, and there's a lot of nuance. So if you think, I tried carnivore and it didn't work, it's like, well, what was your carnivore diet that you tried? Because they're all different. There is no the carnivore diet, capital T, capital C, capital D. There's no such thing. Just like there's no such thing as the Mediterranean diet. They're all different. So just trust the process, and it's all about kind of trialing and erroring until you find your version of the proper human diet. We're all on a spectrum of this carnivore diet. It's just whereabouts do we lie.
Great advice. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.